The MCU has always had its heroes, but behind every great hero, there's someone keeping them alive, sane, or out of jail. From a teenager whose most dangerous weapon is a school laptop, to a one-man flying warship so heavily armed that he makes a nuclear submarine look like a water pistol. These are Marvel's greatest sidekicks, explained. Rhodey. If you want to talk about the absolute blueprint for a ride-or-die MCU partnership, you have to look at Rhodey. Long before he ever put on a suit, this man was Tony Stark's sanity anchor. Let's be real, Tony was an absolute nightmare to deal with. Rhodey didn't have it easy, whether it was his industry-shaking corporate conferences or him drunk driving in an Iron Man suit. But make no mistake, Rhodey is not just Iron Man light. As War Machine, his track record is actually insane. While Tony was out here playing with elegant, sleek nanotech, Rhodey brought straight-up unfiltered heavy artillery. He's basically a flying battleship. Look at his resume. He held down the fort against Justin Hammer's rogue drones, absolutely vaporized the Outrider hordes in the Wakanda trenches, and stood toe-to-toe with Thanos' entire army in Endgame. Rhodey started out as a strict military babysitter, but he ended up a fierce Avenger and one of the few characters that lasted since the first Iron Man. If you're wondering where he was during the Battle of New York, fun fact, he almost made it. While Loki was opening a giant wormhole over Manhattan, Rhodey was quite literally on the other side of the planet in Asia, tracking down 10-ring terrorists. Tony actually tried calling him when the aliens started raining down, but since Rhodey was actively dodging tank fire from a rogue cell using black market hammer tech, he couldn't exactly make it across the Atlantic in time. According to the comic, he literally flew back as fast as his thrusters could carry him, landing in New York just as the dust was settling and the core Avengers were finishing up their post-victory shawarma. Wong. When we first met him in Doctor Strange, he was the stone-faced librarian who was taking none of Strange's ego.
And out in the secret book you get when you become Sorcerer Super.
Fast forward a few phases, and this man has lost none of his sass, even more so after being promoted to Sorcerer Supreme. What really stands out about Wong, though, is that he's rare in the MCU. And I don't mean that he's special. Actually, that's kind of the thing. He's not special. He's just your everyday guy who's pretty good at his job, which, sure, happens to be mystic portals, ancient artifacts, and what is essentially managing Hogwarts. But still, he's not some prodigy, half celestial, or gamma giant. Wong is that reliable friend in the corner that you always go to. It's like he knows the superhero world and is experienced with it enough to make sense of the chaos. Plus, he's just a likable dude. He's not entirely the straight man to Strange's comedian, he has his own fun too, and he's never been afraid to clap back at Strange and hold him accountable. He's a guy that you would call for anything, whether that's war with Thanos, an underground boxing match, or defending Kamartaj from a crazy witch. Being a no BS, down-to-earth guy in a universe of fantastical, marvelous beings can get you pretty far in life. Happy Hogan. Of course, you can't talk about Tony's pillars of support without mentioning Happy Hogan. Look, the reason we love Happy isn't just because he's the reliable guy behind the scenes or because he's been some long-running gag. I think the reason I personally really love Happy Hogan is that it feels like he is one of the most deeply empathetic characters in the entire MCU. I mean, I could pick a lot of moments, but I'll just pick this one.
You're not Iron Man. You're never going to be Iron Man. Nobody could live up to Tony. Not even Tony. Tony was my best friend. And he was a mess. He second-guessed everything he did. He was all over the place. The one thing that he did that he didn't second-guess was picking you.
Man, the thing is, he could have told Peter a lot of things here, but let's unpack what he actually says. First, I think Happy's just more mature than we ever give him credit for. He understood what was consuming Peter, the weight of living up to Tony Stark, and so he gave him the best relief that he could have by telling him that not even Tony could live up to that. In that moment, Peter remembered the Avenger who sacrificed his life, the one who made all the important calls, the guy who could lead a press conference in the afternoon and fight off aliens by night. But Happy reminded him that wasn't who Tony was. In just one scene, he comforted the boy behind the mask by reminding him of who the man behind the suit really was, reminding Peter that Tony was a confused, self-doubting, paranoid mess of a person, but he just kept going on. He is a regular guy, as regular as it gets in the MCU, but he tries his best. Even if Natasha is tearing through half a dozen guys, Happy's the kind of man who would still try his best to take out one scrub. And in both the MCU and the real world, being a solid friend is a superpower. Kate Bishop. In terms of official, really on-the-nose sidekicks, Kate's the obvious pick. You earn that much when you literally rob a Ronin suit after crashing a black market auction. Kate's one of the most chaotic entries into the MCU recently, and the thing is, she doesn't really wait around for Clint. She's not the Robin to his Batman. Kate makes her own moves, and through most of Hawkeye, she was doing things like breaking into high-security apartments, investigating her own mother's criminal ties, and going toe-to-toe with a Black Widow. And let's not forget taking the Kingpin in a brutal one-on-one fistfight and walking away with a win. That gives her something in common with a certain blind lawyer, too. Speaking of her fights, she actually has some pretty good synergy with Clint. Look at that iconic car chase scene on the bridge. Clint's hearing aid is smashed, so they are communicating purely on instinct. He's driving and handing her unlabeled trick arrows, and she's flawlessly executing the shots, from acid arrows to the giant Pym particle arrow, like she's been doing this for years with him. And now, she's officially a part of the Barton family, which sets the stage for an actual hero-sidekick dynamic in the MCU. We had one with Peter and Tony, and I think we are overdue for a replacement. Plus, it would be really cool to see them become key players as a team. I mean, the stakes are so high now that the bow and arrow skill set is a little outclassed at this point. Sam Wilson. The foundation of Sam and Steve's relationship is a little unique. It wasn't built on superhero theatrics, a mentor/mentee dynamic with an overly excited teenager, or something out of pure necessity like Daredevil and Angela Del Toro. When they first cross paths running laps around the tidal basin in Washington, D.C., Steve isn't looking to recruit a partner, and Sam certainly isn't angling to join the Avengers. They simply connect as two combat veterans trying to navigate the isolating reality of civilian life. The core of their friendship is a profound understanding of each other's struggles, sacrifices, and the losses that they have piled up over the years. For Steve, that was Bucky, who we'll get to in a minute, and for Sam, it was Riley, his wingman who had died during a combat tour in the Middle East. It's more than anything just a deeply human friendship. It's two guys hanging out. Sam never treats Steve like anything more than what he is, a good guy, a solid soldier, and a decent judge of character. And similarly, Steve never approaches Sam as anybody but a friend. Sam is one of the very few people who doesn't treat Steve like a living legend. And that's kind of because Sam's at the end of a journey that, personally, I think Steve had to go through. He's a veteran who has faced the trauma and toll of war, made his peace with it, and decided to spend the rest of his life doing something that he believed in. Steve, on the other hand, was still navigating through a lot of things, both the loss of his world and life, and waking up in a completely different era. He had the maturity in him to see the man beneath the symbol and say, hey, we've all been there and let's talk about it. I think no scene shows that better than this one.
Must have freaked you out coming home after the whole defrosting thing.
Takes some getting used to.
It's your bed, right?
What's that?
Your bed is too soft. When I was over there, I sleep on the ground, use rock for pillows like a caveman. Now I'm home, lying in my bed, and it's like...
Lying on a marshmallow. I feel like I'm gonna sink right to the floor.
Even in The Winter Soldier, Sam's the first person that Steve reaches out to because he can trust him. And now, Sam's gone from being a sidekick to an Avenger to the next Captain America. I think this is my favorite duo on the list because they both just keep each other grounded in the normal and mundane. Bucky Barnes. If Sam and Steve are a partnership built on mutual adult understanding, Steve and Bucky are a brotherhood built on sheer survival. Their dynamic is completely inverted from almost every other superhero duo because Bucky was actually the original protector. Long before Steve was a super soldier, he was just a stubbornly brave, 90-pound asthmatic who didn't know when to walk away from a fight in an alleyway. That shared history completely recontextualizes everything they do in the modern MCU. When Steve wakes up in the 21st century, everyone treats him like a monument. He's a symbol, a legend, a guy on a trading card. But Bucky is the only person alive who looks at Captain America and just sees the same scrawny guy from Brooklyn. And that perspective goes both ways. The tragedy of Bucky Barnes is that he never actually asked for any of this. He didn't sign up to be a superhero, and he certainly didn't choose to become an assassin. He was a prisoner of war who had literal autonomy and mind stripped away from him for 70 years. While the rest of the world, including Tony Stark and the government, looks at the Winter Soldier and sees a terrifying cold-blooded weapon, Steve is the only person who looks at him and sees a victim. He sees a good man who got left behind in the snow. I think what makes their relationship the emotional core of the Infinity Saga is how beautifully desperate it is. Steve Rogers, the ultimate rule follower, is willing to dismantle the Avengers, become an international fugitive, and fight half of his friends. And sure, he had many reasons, but one of them was just to keep Bucky safe in civil war. It's a surprisingly selfish move from the most selfless guy in the universe, and it's entirely because Bucky is the last remaining tether that Steve has to his original life. But Bucky himself has been on a journey throughout his time in the MCU, which I think has been about control. Bucky started out having no control of his life, constantly being used as a tool in someone else's war. But now, he's really taken control of his own life. I mean, going from a brainwashed assassin to a congressman is a pretty good career trajectory for anyone. Sometimes you meet a guy that you would risk anything for, the kind of friend who, if he's in, you're in too. And I think that's what Bucky and Steve always were. Ned Leeds. Every other sidekick that we have talked about so far is a battle-hardened veteran, a highly trained operative, or an absolute combat powerhouse. And then there's Ned Leeds. Ned is literally just a high school sophomore who likes building Lego Star Wars sets and hanging out in the library. And you know what? That's exactly what makes him and Peter so refreshing. What makes Ned so iconic to the fan base is how deeply self-aware he is. He explicitly claims the title of the guy in the chair. He actively wants to sit behind a dual monitor setup in the school computer lab, hack into mainframes, and guide his best friend through a stealth mission. But underneath all the geeky enthusiasm, Ned is fiercely, unapologetically loyal. In Homecoming, he helps Peter bypass the restrictions on a multi-billion-dollar Stark Tech suit, fully knowing the trouble that he could get into. When a supervillain literally corners him in a school hallway with a shock gauntlet, Ned doesn't run, he stalls. The dude even learned how to maneuver a sling ring to get Peter back. Their friendship is one of the anchors of the MCU's Spider-Man trilogy, and Ned is a core part of Peter's sidecast. Whenever Peter is being pulled into the massive world-ending orbit of the Avengers, Ned is his link back to a normal life and reality. He is an all-in-one package for Pete. Math decathlon, or illegal weapons smuggler / budding supervillain, Ned is one guy Pete can always call. They had one of the purest bonds in the MCU, and personally, it made No Way Home all the more bittersweet for me. I'm still holding out hope that Ned and MJ end up being the missing pieces that Peter needs to make the world remember who he is. There are a few more sidekicks than the ones that we've gone over so far, but then this video would be way longer than I intended. Let's be brutally honest though. Half of our favorite heroes would be dead, broke, or emotionally spiraling in a corner without having these guys in their corner. Some of them even started as sidekicks, like Peter, but eventually grew into their own thing. Maybe that's a bad example. Peter grew up pretty fast, but you get the point.